Climbing is about learning from your mistakes. If you can't learn from your failures, you won't grow as a climber. Today, we're going to talk about my biggest failure so far in my first few years of climbing and what I learned from it. We're going to go over all the common new climber mistakes I made and how my experience through this failure made me a better climber physically and mentally. Then, I'm going to close the book on this chapter and finally send the project. The area around North Bend is one of Washington's best and most famous climbing areas. The World Wall, on the site of Little Cy in particular, is Washington's best crag for hard sport climbing. It has a huge concentration of difficult climbs, including the hardest ones that exist in the state. During my first year as a climber, this area was where I went climbing outdoors for the first time, at one of the easier crags nearby. As a new climber, the hard climbs at World Wall gave the area a mystical aura. I wanted to grow into the kind of climber that would be strong enough to climb those harder routes someday. During my second year of climbing, I was getting steadily better and sending harder grade climbs indoors, mostly on top rope. I decided it was time to start on a project at World Wall, so I went on a mountain project and picked out some that I thought would be hard but attainable goals. The first route I picked out was called Rainy Day Women, a long and famous 512A. The route is endurance-based with multiple cruxes and rests, and is likely the most popular route of that grade in Washington. I'd done a fair amount of 12A and 12B climbs on top rope in the gym, and thought I would send it quickly in just 1 or 2 sessions, but the reality turned out to be very different. During the first session, I did every move without too much trouble, and felt confident I would send soon. However, during the next 7 visits to World Wall over the course of that summer and fall, I failed on every occasion, despite that being the only hard project I was trying. I came really close several times, but ended up frustrated and confused after every fresh failure. I started to think I just wasn't cut out for lead or outdoor climbing. Looking back on it, I can see very clearly the new climber mistakes I was making, but at the time I wasn't sure what was wrong. I'm going to go through those mistakes, as they are all very common new climber mistakes. Hopefully you will find them useful on your own journey of growing as a climber. We'll start with one of the most important mistakes that really mess with my head and my perception of my own growth as a climber. It's having unrealistic expectations and measuring my growth purely by grades. This is a really common mistake to make, especially for new climbers. The grading system gamifies the sport, and it's easy to get addicted to that feeling of conquering a new grade while you're a beginner. And new grades go down frequently. This was definitely the case for me, and it led me to measure my growth as a climber purely by what new grades I could send. By the time I got to Rainy Day Women, I was on to more challenging grades like 512A and 512B in the gym, and progress was slowing. Unwilling to accept that, I picked routes and timelines that fit with my unrealistic vision of linear progression through the grades. Rainy Day Women was supposed to be merely an introduction, before moving on to lead outdoor climbs that were more difficult than anything I'd sent in the gym on top rope. With such an unrealistic plan, I was setting myself up to fail. The corresponding lesson I've learned is that grades aren't the only measure of success. It's possible to grow immensely as a climber without sending a new hardest grade. The more you can orient your goals in climbing around learning rather than sending, the faster you'll be able to grow, because you'll have the potential for growth on every attempt of every project, not just the send attempts. Speaking of growing as a climber, if these tips are useful to you, please consider subscribing, as it means a lot and motivates me to make more videos like these. I also made the mistake of choosing a single hard project and wasting a whole summer of climbing only on that climb. This can be a really tempting mistake, as it presents the illusion of a shortcut to progressing as a climber. At the time I first tried Rainy Day Women, which is a 512A route, the hardest climb I had done on lead outdoors was a 510C. But because I'd done plenty of 511s in the gym, I thought I could just skip the 5 outdoor grades and save time by jumping straight to a 512A. Of course, this backfired, and I ended up sending nothing at all. I've now learned the benefit of building a pyramid of climbs at different levels to broaden your skill set, instead of just working on your hardest grade all the time. On my recent trip through New Zealand, I only had 1 or maybe 2 sessions at different crags we visited. This was really good for me, as it forced me to pick climbs I could send on site, or send in a few attempts. As a result, I had a lot more fun and grew more as a climber during a few weeks there than I did during months of projecting here. You can see a video I made of one of those climbs here. My third mistake is also common among newer gym climbers. I mostly ignored conditions, time of day, and other logistics. I was so caught up in the climb that I missed important details that might have allowed me to ascend if I had been paying attention. I figured that as long as it wasn't raining, one day would be just like another, and that I could go at whatever time of day was convenient. This ruined several sessions. One time, the sun came up and hit the wall just as I was getting ready for a ascent attempt, making it really hard to ascend in the heat. Another time, I came at a busy time and had to wait for a bunch of other people on the route, which led it to get dark before I could get a proper ascent attempt. I was forgetting basics like bringing snacks and warming up properly because I was so desperate to ascend. Looking back on it, the lessons are painfully obvious. Research the best time of day to get good conditions for that particular crag. Don't pick the most popular climb of the grade in the state as your project. Remember to warm up properly and bring snacks and water along to recover between attempts. A fourth mistake I made was not paying attention to skin levels and not resting enough in the days before a trip to the crag. Throughout the 8 sessions that summer, I never managed more than 2 good attempts because I was always low on skin, rest, or both. I would sometimes climb the day before at the gym without any thought to how it might impact my outdoor session. The lesson here is to learn to prioritize. I also had indoor projects I was working on and didn't want to fall behind on, but because I was unwilling to prioritize resting for either, I got mediocre attempts on both. If you're climbing a project at your limit, you have to expect that your performance and the volume you can handle in other sessions will be diminished. The final mistake was more subtle and took me a long time to root out. Unlike the other ones, which should have been fairly obvious, this one may take some more experience to spot. It's not accepting and working on your fear of falling. On the project, I would get so pumped by the time I got to the crux, which baffled me given that the rests are really good. I was over-gripping and climbing way too slowly and carefully in the easier sections because I was afraid to fall. What made it worse was that I didn't want to accept that as the cause. After all, I had a vision of the advanced outdoor lead climber I wanted to be, and that vision didn't include being afraid of falling. My logical mind was convinced the climb was completely safe, and I thought that would be enough for my subconscious to also let go of the fear of falling. But it wasn't. In reality, my subconscious was still scared, and that was affecting how I climbed hugely. The lesson I've learned from this is that you need to accept that you may still feel an irrational fear of falling, even on climbs you're completely sure are safe. Once you've accepted it's happening to you, then you'll be able to take steps to address it. There's lots of ways to do that, including fall practice, breathing, and others, which I might go into in a future video. But you won't be able to get started on those until you've accepted the problem. And if your problem is not being subscribed to this channel, don't accept that one either. That one's a quick fix. Now that we've gone over the mistakes, I'm going to go ahead and finish the project. It won't be my hardest grade anymore, but it's still satisfying to finish what you start and see how much you've grown throughout the process. If the tips in this video were useful to you, make sure you're subscribed by hitting that button now, as there's more lessons like this that I'll be sharing in the future that you don't want to miss. Also, don't forget to check out this climbing video as well.